Thank you so much, Caitlin. That's a great segue. We are recording this. A number of friends have let us know that they won't be able to be here, and we like to post this on our blog on the website. Your photo won't be up on there unless you speak. So if you don't want to be in the video, then that's one way to stay away from it. Again, if you want to write something about yourself into the chat, you can write your name and anything else you want us all to know about you, your pronouns, where you live, your connection to QVS, etc. So we have a couple of things we're going to do this evening together, evening, afternoon. And Caitlin, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. Our first section is some introductions, going through some of the numbers of this year, of this time, 2022 to 2023, our current program year. And then we have an opportunity to hear from Evan, who's a current fellow in Boston and is giving his time, and thank you so much. In the second part of our time this evening, we'll talk about the current challenges. I think many of you know that this is not the easiest of times for Quaker Voluntary Service, and thank you for caring about us and caring about where we're headed, which is the third part of our evening. Our strategic plan, checking in about what we've been working on, and doing some visioning for the future, including having time in small groups in breakout rooms. So for introductions, I'll start. We have a number of people here who are going to be sharing this evening. Caitlin, next slide. Thank you. I'm Hilary Burgin. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the executive director of Quaker Voluntary Service, and we will go in alphabetical order by first name for the other people who are going to introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Caitlin Churchill, and I'm the communications consultant for QVS. I use she, her pronouns, and I live in Portland, Oregon.
Hi, everybody. My name is Damon Motz-Storey. I use they, them, theirs pronouns. I'm the clerk of the board of directors of Quaker Voluntary Service. I'm based in Portland, Oregon, where you can see the lovely trees in my backyard behind me.
Hey everyone, my name is Evan Saito. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm a current fellow in Boston, and I'm serving at the East Boston Neighborhood Health Center.
Hi everyone, my name is Haley Castle-Miller, and I'm the Development and Outreach Coordinator. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an alum of the 2016 to 2017 cohort and calling from Portland, Maine.
Hi, I'm Rachel Logan-Wood. I also go by Woody. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the alumni coordinator and the Portland City coordinator for QVS. I'm also an alumni of the 2017-2018 QVS Portland year, and I'm calling from Portland, Oregon.
Thank you. It is so fun to see all of you, and there are so many other people on this call who have been really important in the time that Quaker Voluntary Service has been around. There are local support committee members, spiritual nurturers, founding board members, current board members. So just, I wish that everybody got to say a little bit about themselves verbally, because you are a really incredible group of people. Great. So we're going to do a little review of 2022 to 2023. First, Caitlin, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. We started the year with 18 fellows in 4 cities. In the spring of last year, we discerned that we needed to pause the Atlanta program. So we had 18 fellows between the cities of Boston, Philadelphia, the Twin Cities, and Portland. This means that we got to work with that many site placements, which is a really important way that the young adult fellows in the program are engaging in service. We work with local friends. We continue to really value that partnership. We have partnerships with 17 Friends meetings and churches in the program cities that we have houses in. And each one of the fellows has a spiritual nurturer, and the local support committee in each of those cities is between 7 and 15 people. So there's quite a circle of support that's like just one ring outside of what the fellows and staff are doing together. And I think that that's really unique for a program like Quaker Voluntary Service. This upcoming year, 6 out of the 11 incoming fellows will be at site placements where we have fellows this year. And that continuity for the site placements is really important and helpful. The fellows are doing really capacity building work at these organizations. They're supporting communities that otherwise wouldn't be supported. And so to continue to get to work with those site placements is really important and wonderful. And I also just want to note here, this is embedded in that third point. We will have 11 incoming fellows this upcoming year, which is the smallest number that we've had in a long time. And we'll get to why we think that is and what we're doing about it a little later. When I talk about the fellows, I also want to talk about our staff. I am pretty sure I have the best coworkers that exist in the world. So thank you. Some things of note about our staff team: all of the city coordinators are alum of the program. And I think that this is, first of all, it's really beneficial to QVS for us to have coordinators who know the ins and outs of being a fellow themselves. But more than that, I appreciate that we get to be a part of each staff member's vocational journey, whether they're an alum or not. And it feels particularly special to be a part of young adults' vocational journeys and understanding of their ministry and living into this ministry and having them on staff, paying them for their ministry. It's a ministry below the ministry of Quaker Voluntary Service. This year, we invested in 3 roles, some of which we've had in different iterations, but we have new staff in the position of the alumni coordinator, Rachel Logan-Wood, and she's going to speak next. The recruitment coordinator, Ruth Kutcher, who's also on this call, and our communications consultant, Caitlin, who introduced herself at the beginning. And lastly, we often get the question of, how is it that Quaker Voluntary Service is Quaker? Can you show us how Quaker you are? And I wish that everybody could come to a staff meeting or to a conversation between colleagues. We are really grounded in Quaker practice, and we reflect on our spiritual lives together. I think decision-making we try to do through unity and coming to a sense of the meeting rather than through a top-down decision-making hierarchy. The last kind of piece of this that I'm going to hand it off to Rachel is, currently we're doing a lot of work engaging with alumni. And so we get to hear from Rachel Logan-Wood about that.
Yeah, so I am the alumni coordinator. I started my position last November 2022. And in this time, I've been creating relationships and connections with current alumni. We have 240 alumni currently, 245 alumni currently. And in February, I sent out an alumni engagement survey. We had 84 responses, which is about 35% of alumni responded to the survey. And I asked questions about how alumni would like to engage with QVS, with current fellows, and with each other. Asked a lot of questions about visioning for the alumni community as well, and asked questions about interest on serving on the alumni council. So over the past couple of months, I've been reaching out to folks who indicated that they would be interested in being on the alumni council. And I asked around 20 people and 7 accepted. We had our first meeting yesterday, actually, and there was a lot of energy and excitement around it. So it was very wonderful. Right now, we are planning an alumni council retreat in the fall to sort of do some connecting with each other and also visioning for the alumni council and what we would like to do and how we would like to foster stronger community for alumni, and also planning an alumni reunion, our second one, that would be for all alumni in the spring. And after the alumni reunion, the alumni council will sort of shift our focus a little bit towards how we can foster stronger connections and community between alumni. And how I guess sort of like workshops and events that we can hold, how we can have a more thought out and smoother transition from fellows into the alumni community and what that looks like. So that's just a few things that the Alumni Council will be working on. And we also asked some questions about recruitment and how alumni would like to be engaged and involved in recruitment. And I think that the plan for that is to sort of engage alumni who have different interests with recruitment, whether it's going to their alma mater, college, or having a local info session or event at Quaker meetings, and also engaging alumni with local Quakers in the Quaker community. And so we're in the process of connecting with folks from the alumni engagement survey who indicated interest in helping with recruitment.
Thank you so much, Woody. It's nice hearing somebody else's voice. And now we get to hear another voice, which is from Evan. We asked Evan to come and just tell us a little bit about what his year has been like. It was pretty open-ended, and so I'm excited to hear what you want to share with us.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for having me here. So I was thinking about the queries that you guys sent to me, and I think the first query was like, what is the ways that I've seen myself grow, and then what are the big takeaways so far from this year. So I think, when I started with QVS, my big goal was learning how to set better boundaries in my life, learning how to set better boundaries when it came to how I approached work, learning how to take a step back. I think college was a great experience, but it also was a time where I was sort of pushing at 500% all the time. And so a big goal for me at the beginning of the year was develop practices and figure out ways to intentionally step back. And a little anecdote that I wanted to share is in October of this year, I got a concussion. And I couldn't work. I was really out of it. And I remember having a conversation with our city coordinator, Zenaida, and just like feeling so terrible because I felt like, oh man, I'm letting down, letting down the house. I'm letting down my site placement. They're relying on me to show up, and I'm, I can't be there for that. And what I found was something that we talked about was that it was actually, maybe setting boundaries was my initial goal, but also like a bigger process in terms of setting boundaries for me was actually learning how to like ask for help and learning how to like look to the people around me and see where I can ask for support and where I can be held. And so when I looked at that situation of that concussion, that's a very like that's a medical boundary. I could not work. I could not look at a screen. I could not, do anything like that. But where I think really the true learning happened was when I was able to with the support from Zenaida and the support of my housemates, also learned that a big part of learning about myself and learning about what I need in terms of my life as a professional going forward, my life in terms of living in community going forward, was also that it's not just setting that line, it's also okay, you set that line, and then who's on your team, who are you asking for help from? So that was definitely like a humbling experience, and it was also like a really really powerful opportunity for me to ask for more from the people around me, ask for more from my coworkers, from my supervisor, and I think that really is like the part where I've seen, I think, like the most opportunities for growth for myself. When I look at the big takeaways, I think so far from this year, I mean, I love living in community. I think that's kind of a given if that's sort of something that brings us all together here today. But I think one of the things that I've learned is that it takes time. Like I think something that I've so appreciated over the course of this year is watching the ways that our community has sort of like fluctuated and faced challenges and grown. And it hasn't been easy. There's been a lot of moments where you're living with other people and you're really getting to know every part of them, and that's not always great. And then in turn they get to know me, right? And I think that sort of connecting with that first point about like learning that sort of that practice of setting boundaries is also asking for more from community. I think the big takeaway from this year up to June is that part of that cycle of getting close and sort of building community is also learning how to practice asking for more, asking for and also asking how we can show up for each other. But yeah, I think those are the main points of reflection I have. Thanks so much, everyone, for your support.
Thank you, Evan. Really appreciate you sharing that. I'm gonna take us into part 2, everybody. And thank you again, Evan, for sharing your story. I think really honestly, the thing that is coming to me the most in the wake of you sharing those things is it's reminding me that like it's very easy to have a narrative of, hey, there's fewer people interested in QVS. Oh no, why is that? And that actually sometimes gets in the way of recognizing that QVS is like still doing the program every single day and week, and fellows like Evan are experiencing this, and that's really meaningful. It doesn't matter how many people are experiencing that. Like each person's individual journey through QVS is one that we're nurturing and creating this container for, and that's important. That's really special. Can we go to the next slide, please? So we are experiencing some challenges, and the main challenge is just that when we started to get about midway through the acute phase of the pandemic, we realized that a number of things were shifting underneath of our feet. One of them was that our usual referral network of word of mouth between different college classes and community groups on campuses and other non-campus spaces were not meeting with each other as often anymore, and they weren't connecting in person with each other because of a lot of remote schooling and pandemic time. That has been historically our best recruitment tool, is word of mouth from people who've had a good experience with Quaker Voluntary Service and then go back to their campuses or communities to tell about how meaningful the experience was to people who might be interested in doing it. And that slowed down a lot after 2021. So we wondered, is this maybe a one-year blip? Is this going to be something that comes surging back after a little hiatus, a little eddy or pause? And no, the answer seems to be that this is not a one-year phenomenon, because we did not receive a big increase of fellow applicants this year over last year. And last year's applicants were low enough that we had to take a pause in our program in Atlanta. And then this year, as you can see from the slide, we've just made the recent decision this month, actually, the hard decision to have to also lay down the Twin Cities program for the upcoming year. And we don't know whether we'll be able to open it up again after a year of a pause. We're very grateful because the local support committee of friends in Minneapolis and St. Paul have a really thorough and well thought out plan for doing support for recruitment and outreach and site placement partnerships in the Twin Cities, to give it as good of a go as we can to try to restart this program again in another year, which is really inspiring to me and my fellow board members. And we're really grateful for Twin Cities friends who are really committed to making it so that this upcoming year is an active fallow year, which I like a lot, right? It's this notion that when the crops are not visible above the surface of the ground, that doesn't mean that good things aren't happening in the soil. And so I really appreciate that. It helps to temper the loss and the sadness of not being able to serve a program in the Twin Cities in the upcoming year. But the hard truth of it was we only had one fellow who was committed to the program, and that's just not what the Quaker Voluntary Service experience is about. It's about intentional living community. And so in order to preserve the quality of the experience for the fellows that are interested in the program, we opted to pause the Twin Cities program so that we can have at least 3 to 4 fellows in the other 3 cities that we're continuing to serve in, which are Portland, Oregon, Boston, and Philadelphia. Caitlin, can we go to the next slide, please? This is just some more numbers that help to illustrate what I've just been talking about. As you can see, at that 2020 mark, that really was the height of some of our interest in the program. We had a little bit of a dip in 2021, but it wasn't substantial. It wasn't like massively shifting to our program. But the real change came in 2022. That's when we had to pause the Atlanta program. That's when things really started to significantly peter off in terms of the number of applicants that we got and the number of fellowships that we were able to actually confirm. As you can see, we have to get more applicants than actual confirmed fellows because not everyone is qualified for the program. But something I do want to highlight is that, again, the quality of the people that are still interested in QVS at this point in time is amazing. And it's a truly incredible group of people. And it's worth noting that compared to our history as an organization, we've actually recruited a greater proportion of applicants who identify as people of color and applicants who self-identify as either transgender or gender non-binary. That's really wonderful because it means that the beloved community of the people that are doing this program is becoming even more diverse. And it's worth noting that we always get some interest from international applicants. This year we had 7. It's not represented in this chart because we weren't able to admit them due to visa challenges. There's a lot of hoops that you have to jump through in order to sponsor someone to be able to stay in the country on a work visa. And we're not always able to do that for people, which is unfortunate, but just a reality of some of the legal constraints that we're working within. Let's go to the next slide, please. It's really important to ground these current challenges that QVS is experiencing in the broader context of the sector that we are in. We do religious faith-based service, and we are very much a peer of other organizations that do faith-based service fellowships and programs, as well as secular non-religious programs like AmeriCorps. That's one of the most well-known ones. And what we are hearing from all of these peer organizations is that this is not a trend that is only specific to 1 or 2 organizations. We're seeing a massive change in what young people are interested in doing, and unpaid, stipended internships and fellowships like this are just not seeing as much interest as they were seeing in the past decade. These are a few quotes that we solicited, and we're not naming the names of who these organizations are because we're not trying to be gossipy about it, but we are trying to share that we are in relationship with and in community with these other organizations and institutions that are experiencing these same challenges. And we want to share that and present that to you, right? One organization said, we usually receive 20 to 30 applications. This year we received only 7. Another said, it's been a tough cycle. Application submissions are at about 75 to 85% of where they were this time last year, and 60 to 65% of where they were in 2021. And that mirrors the drop off that happened in 2021 that has kind of sustained or dropped off even more in the year since. And of 9 total candidates for 6 places, one organization said that 3 withdrew and 2 did not accept our offers. That's also consistent with what Quaker Voluntary Service is experiencing. We've had a number of people who have said initially, this sounds really interesting, this sounds good, but then there's some better offer that comes along that people then want to take and then end up withdrawing. Let's go to the next slide, please. I'm going to pass the proverbial microphone back to Hilary because she's going to talk a little bit more about some of the cultural reasons that we suspect are underlying this changing circumstance.
Thank you so much, Damon. So this quote is from an article from NBC, and it reads, essentially, the fundamental needs of safety and security have been shattered repeatedly at a time when this generation was most impressionable. The message for Gen Z from these formative events is clear. You can't rely on others to take care of you. Life is risky. Don't trust an institution or a country or a company to protect and secure your future. And I want to also start this part by saying I am not a Gen Z, a Gen Zer. Gen Zers are from the ages of 12 to 26, more or less. They're folks who were born between 1997 and 2011. So I'm speaking from my vantage point as a millennial and from my very small set of identities, right? Like I have a lens that I'm using that many other people might see things differently. And that's the kind of conversation I want us to be having. So what I'm noticing, and using some studies and statistics that we've found, QVS staff and board and I have found in recent years, one thing that really sticks out to me is that Gen Z as a generation is statistically the most anxious generation at the age where they're surveyed. And I know I've talked to many people, many friends older than Gen Z who say, well, it's always been a really scary world. There's always been a lot to have anxiety about. And I do think that this is a different level of intensity and fear that the young adults feel. And I'm on, the end of this, but climate change has been looming and is here. It is happening right now, and it has been for all of the lives of Gen Zers. Gen Zers have primarily, starting in elementary school, but definitely junior high and high school. School shootings were an everyday part of life in the years since Gen Zers have been in school. We've just had a global pandemic and less than perfect response to that pandemic. Gen Zers are graduating college, if they choose to go to college, with just astronomical debt and not a lot of clarity on how to pay off. It hasn't happened before that a generation has to pay off this much debt, and just general economic uncertainty. So I really want to stress a lot of empathy and love that I have for the young adults who could be doing QVS right now, and understanding of why QVS doesn't feel like the best option for them. There's a platform, an online platform called Handshake, and it connects young adults in colleges and universities with employers. And Handshake surveyed 1,400 recent college graduates and current seniors to ask about their top job search priority, 73% said stability. And that desire for stability makes a lot of sense to me, of having experienced a lot of lack of security and stability for the last number of years, even if we weren't counting everything before that. If we were just looking at, since the beginning of the pandemic, I understand a desire for clarity and like that understanding that you know what to expect. And I think lastly, about the economics of this cultural moment, fellows are working full-time at a site placement. That's the service that they're engaging in. And they're receiving a lot of support and benefits from being a QVS fellow, and not a lot of dollars in the bank. And I think that, definitely some folks are seeing peers who are making a lot more money. And when there's so much uncertainty, it can feel like a really big and hard choice to give up that level of economic stability. And QVS really does fundamentally ask people to take a pause on adding to their financial security. It's a time of growth, but it is a pause on either, supporting family members or putting money into a savings account or getting to explore and travel. It is a pause from that other kind of those other tracks. And I think the other major cultural shift that we're noticing is it feels a little harder now to ask young adults, and I would say honestly probably people of all ages, to really lean into to community and to give up some autonomy. And for those of us who are in the Quaker milieu and have been a part of Quaker business process, sometimes a group that I'm a part of will make a decision that is not my first or second choice, but it's what the group came to unity on, and it's what the discernment led to. And in a time of so much uncertainty, it is hard to feel like it's a good idea to give up your choice and independence. So we are seeing applicants or potential applicants who say that the living in community portion of QVS just seems kind of bananas. So those are some of the recruitment challenges. Those are some of the cultural shifts that we're noticing and how we would articulate it. I think that listening to Gen Zers about what they're excited about and what they're scared about and how they want to spend their time and be engaged in, spiritual community is the number one way to find out if all of this is true. So I encourage you to do that. I will talk a little bit about our recruitment strategy. We have Ruth Kutcher on board. She is full-time year-round, as I mentioned. We have not ever had a person in that position. We've had other, full-time, part-time, full year, but part-time folks, and a couple of different ways of doing recruiting. But this is really exciting to get to have Ruth on board. Ruth organized an enormous number of events. There were 35 in-person visits that QVS staff or alumni or local support committee members or fellows engaged with. There were 20 virtual recruiting events. A lot of colleges and universities are now moving to online career fairs, and QVS staff, Ruth in particular, was at 20 of those. And then I think it's important that we are also engaging with others about our recruitment. And so Ruth was able to engage with alumni, staff, and fellows and local friends to do this recruiting. Damon, I'll hand it to you.
Thank you, Hilary. I'm going to talk about the money now. One of the board's most important roles is financial oversight for the organization. So I'm excited to talk a little bit about what the money actually means, given all of the stuff that we're sharing so far. one of the biggest things when we look at the financial model for Quaker Voluntary Service is that typically about half of our revenue for the organization typically comes from the site placement fees that we partner with and send fellows to work at full time during the program year. That's how the model has worked for a long time. Right now, that's not the case. Approximately 30% of our revenue will be coming from site placements this year, and that's partially that is completely because of our lower application numbers. If we had more fellows participating in the program, we'd have more site placements, spending money on QVS fellows coming and working for them, and our revenue would be more balanced in that place that it has been for a long time. But the fact of the matter is, we've done quite well in pretty much every fundraising goal that we have set for years and years, and that's due to you. That's due to all of our supporters, our amazing community here, because every time we have asked for support and for the revenue and resources that we need to make everything work for QVS, the community comes and hears that call and goes above and beyond, and has done so every single year since I've been on the board of the organization. And that's amazing. Even in some very hard times when people have scaled back their giving, it's clear that people still believe in QVS and what we're doing, and the meaningful experiences that fellows are having in this program. And what this means is that we've had the good fortune to be putting money away into our reserves, into a rainy day fund. And my friends, the rainy day is here. Not all organizations that are doing service programs have the good fortune of a little bit more size and cushion to be able to weather a year or two where interest is just not as high. An example being that the Quaker Quest program in Seattle actually had to close. It was not long ago we got that news. And that's just, that organization was supporting one service house, and they were not able to dip into a big cache of reserves to be able to weather some hard times. We have been able to do that, and we have made the choice to run at a deficit budget for a little bit of time here, so that we can see what's going on, what are the different shifting landscapes underneath of our feet, and what do we need to do to respond to it. So we have the really good fortune of being able to use our strong financial position to ask the questions of what we might want to do differently in order to appeal to fellows that currently can't or won't come into the program. And I'm just thrilled about that. We'll talk a little bit more next about what it is that some of those programs are, but I just wanted to ground us in all of the money pieces of this, because essentially if new pilot programs and if new approaches are not going to work, we may have to right size and scale down the organization at some point if it is truly a very consistent pattern that we don't see a big return to the kinds of numbers we were seeing in 2019, 2020, et cetera. So that's a reality that we may have to move towards eventually, but right now we have not had to do that. And we've been able to allow ourselves some time to think and strategize and plan new ideas. Let's move to the next slide, please. Okay, next we're going to the strategic plan. Hilary, am I passing it off to you again, or?
Yeah, yes, exactly. Hi, thank you so much, Damon. I appreciate getting to hear your perspective as a board member on all of that. So yeah, for the last year or so, we've been working on a strategic plan. We finished our strategic planning process in April of this year. It was a really exciting opportunity to get to work with a consultant, Julia Reisman, who's a member at Northampton Friends Meeting, and has worked on, I don't know, dozens, maybe 100, and probably just dozens of strategic plans over the years in her previous work. And so just as a review of what we were doing during this year, I think many of you know this, but Kaylin, if you can go to the next slide, that'd be great. Thank you. So we conducted a survey last year. Many of you helped with it. And that really laid the groundwork for the work that we did at board retreats and staff retreats in the last year. The board met together for a long weekend in May last year, and then the board and staff worked together in November of this year, or of this past year, 6 months ago, 8 months ago. And those were really special times to get to go deep together, and also have that that time just getting to know one another, and eating meals and doing some things that we hadn't gotten to do since pre-pandemic, since before 2020. The work that we did in the summer of last year was coming to unity on a theory of change. And a theory of change is essentially an articulation of how we as an organization think that change happens in the world. What we came together to was that we think change happens through people committing to spirit-centered community as the source of loving transformation in the world now and in the future. And I'll just put that into the chat because I think it's a nice thing to be able to see. So again, people committing to spirit-centered community as a source of loving transformation now and in the future. And that community as the center is true for fellows, but it's also true for alumni. And, Woody was talking about the work that she's doing, bringing alumni together, helping to create a community there. And it also is true for the local friends that we partner with and the community of support that QVS enjoys and invests in, and that invests in QVS. And we've been, I'm a gardener, a former farmer, and many of us on the board and on staff like plants. So we've been thinking a lot about plants and kind of plant analogies, not new for Quakers. And I've also been thinking about the word radical, and it has two meanings. Caitlin, would you show the next slide? Thank you. Radical has a meaning in botany and and linguistically. And in linguistics, radical means relating to the root. And in botany, radical is a springing forth from the root or stem. And I love that we get to do radical work at QVS, and we're doing radical work by digging in deep to our history and grounding as a Quaker organization, Quakers who have always tried new things, worked together, created community. We're a little outside of the norm, and living into the creativity and curiosity that this botanical meaning kind of brings forth for me, of like, where are we headed? Where are all of the little roots and shoots going to? And I think our strategic plan does not have all the answers, and it instead is centered on what are the queries that we're working with, the board and the staff and our supporters. What do we get to wrestle with in the coming months and years? And Damon, I'll pass it off to you to think about or talk about some of those examples.
Thank you, Hilary. Yeah, no, one of the things that has always been true about QVS is that this has always been an experiment. Frankly, the founders went forward with this and said, maybe this will be something that that resonates and that works, and maybe it won't be, and that's all right. And there's always been this curious approach to, let's try this and see how it goes, and then learn from it and change things and iterate and try something else new again and experiment and keep going with that. So I feel very much that we've been living into our roots as an organization and trying to stay true to that joyful experimentation of the founders of QVS. And in principally, we've been looking at what are some of these big underlying challenges that are facing us, and what do we do to respond to them. I think a really not insubstantial challenge is just the economy. The fact that inflation is at this enormous rate right now, the cost of living and the cost of a lot of essentials are so high and increasing so quickly. while the labor market has also changed from last decade to this decade in such a way that a lot of people who don't have much job experience can find fairly well-paying jobs right out of gate in a way that that wasn't really the case when I graduated college and was entering the workforce and did a Quaker Voluntary service year. So with that in mind, one of our seed ideas that we're looking at is changing the compensation structures for both fellows and staff. The theory being that, we're asking ourselves, what is it that we actually need to be compensating fellows so that this isn't a painful financial experience? We may be asking folks to forego adding to their savings and having a full and complete income, but we don't want people to feel like they're taking a hit to their financial stability by doing a year with QVS. And so that's one of the questions we're going to be asking is, what is the right level of compensation for participants in the program, as well as the people who are supporting them most directly, our staff, so that we are remaining competitive and supporting staff in this rapidly shifting economy. Number two is expanding and changing around the types of site placement partners that we work with. So traditionally, we've mostly only worked with 501c3 tax-exempt nonprofit organizations. And we're now looking at what it could look like to partner with small businesses that are aligned with our social values and are doing social change work, and who could really benefit from having a QVS fellow, and for whom a fellow would really benefit from the work experience as well. So that's one thing we're looking at. We're also looking at item number 3 is kind of similar. It's a notion of a bring your own site placement or self-designed site placement experience. So we're asking the question, what could it look like if we were to invite fellows who already have a work experience in mind that we have not paired them with, but that they want to do that work experience while being in the context of intentional living community and trying on the Quaker way. So we want to explore whether that sort of experience might work well for the potential fellows in the future. And then finally, number 4, changes to program expectations. I think this is really in response to just recognizing that there are a lot more challenges and hardships that just go into navigating, for example, living in an intentional living community of a lot of different folks who, and their pandemic has not ended, even though the public health emergency has been, undone by different government institutions and things like that. The fact is, like, we still all have masks and COVID tests on hand, and if someone gets exposed, then their housemates are all potentially exposed, and it's complicated. Where there's lots of things that we're having to wrestle with day to day that we weren't having to wrestle with in 2019. And so item 4 is us wanting to look at maybe making the program experience a little less time intensive and a little bit less stressful for fellows, because right now it's a very intensive program and an intensive year, and that's great. It leads to a lot of growth and learning and exploration, but it also can make folks feel really tired and overwhelmed. And so we want to try to see if we can find the right level of intensity for the program expectation of fellows. Those are some of the things that we're looking at discerning and fleshing out and threshing. And let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. It's now basically time for us to hear from you as to how these potential changes are sitting with you, as well as what sorts of visions do you have for QVS's future, especially our role within the world and our role within the Religious Society of Friends. So I'll pass it back over to whoever's gonna explain the worship sharing section of the program. But we basically recognize that we can't discern these potential changes to the QVS program without a much broader constituency of Quaker Voluntary Service supporters. And so we want to start with you, and we want to give you an opportunity to discuss what we've shared with you today.
I'm sure many of you are probably buzzing with all this information. It's a lot to take in. Some of you, you've heard some of this before, others, this is all new. So yeah, as Damon shared, we'll have some breakout room time. It'll just be about 10 minutes in the breakout rooms. And we would encourage you to work with these queries. How are these changes, these shifts sitting with you? What's coming up for you? And what vision do you see for QVS and in our role in the world and in the Religious Society of Friends? I would love for each group to have somebody who's just taking some notes, and for those to get sent over to me or Caitlin or Haley after this. This is not like lip service to, we want to hear from you. Like, we really do want to hear from you. We want to be able to record what your thoughts and questions and curiosities and fears and frustrations are. So I hope that you do really share all of that in your small group. When we get back from small groups, we'll have time for a question and answer, and then we'll wrap up. And I believe that one of our tech hosts has been working on making some small groups. And yes, you're being invited to them right now. Bye-bye.
In some spaces, I've heard this called as the time when people are raptured into their groups.
Yes, that's right. Wonderful.
Go team.
So Caitlin, you can pause the recording. Hi, welcome back. Welcome back, friends. Thank you so much. Thank you for talking with one another and hearing one another and listening. And I hope that you got to learn something new or get curious with somebody else or have opinions with somebody else. And I would love to just hear like one or two reflections from that time. Either, wow, I really hate breakout rooms, or I heard this thing that really resonated with me, or anything in between.
Yes to paying fellows more.
Thank you.
And also that provides some financial challenges to the organization.
I think it's important for fellows to understand or be given the household budget so that they know that they are in fact getting paid through free rent, free food, free transportation, free utilities, so that they understand that you know, if you're working on your own, those things you have to pay for out of your paycheck.
Related to that, we were talking about sort of financial education about the year of service, but also the next year. So like, how much money do I really need to launch myself? And do the alumni say, do they catch up with their peers after, you know, how many years or whatever, and because they were living simply? And then that came to an interesting discussion is, well, what if we bagged the big expensive cities and we had QVS in Peoria or Dayton, Ohio, right? Where they could learn that smaller cities can be more affordable also.
So many ideas. Thank you, friends. We are going to have some time for Q&A, question and answer. And so you can write into the chat or raise your physical or electronic hand. Electronic hand will more likely be seen. And Haley is going to toggle back and forth from questions asked here, questions asked in the chat, and any questions that that folks submitted when you registered.
Yeah, John.
Hi, Hilary and everyone. It's great to be here and excellent presentation. I guess my question is, maybe it's definitely a longer thing to think on, but one focus is on the changes, but another focus is what's the fundamental and distinct and Quakerly value proposition that we could envision morphing towards in QVS. So to me, it's not just about, well, now we're going to start to pay people. That could be a part of it, but what's the overall value proposition that's distinctively Quaker and different and of value to this generation of young adults? I don't know if that's a question or a statement, but I think it's at the heart of the fundamental modification and changes we need to make to continue to evolve and experiment and be of service.
I'm glad for that sentiment that you shared, John. Thank you for that. And I think I'll just offer, I think that's part of why it felt really important to talk about the theory of change in the work that we're doing here, because it's like, what is it that we are actually specifically bringing to the table as opposed to some of these other faith-based service years? And we're really centered on that as a board and as a staff. And from my perspective, it feels to me like people actually really want the Quakerliness and the like experience of community and Quaker living, with some exceptions. Of course, there's some people who don't want that, but it feels to me like the larger structural barriers that we're trying to fix and address are so that people can get to the unique value that we offer of, seeking and spiritual wandering and doing that in this community way. That's at least how I see it. It's like, how can we, that unique value that we share with the world, how can we remove the barriers that young people are feeling to saying yes to that?
I don't know if you saw, I reached over to my bookshelf. I've been thinking about a pamphlet from Tom Gates, who's a friend in Philadelphia yearly meeting, Members One of Another. It's a Pendle Hope pamphlet number 371. And he writes about basically that, well, I'll read the paragraph, but in Quaker faith and practice, the individual and the meeting are in a dynamic, mutually supportive, and reciprocal relationship. Viewed from the perspective of the wider culture, our most, quote, countercultural claim is that far from being mutually exclusive, true community and true individuality reinforce one another. We believe that the most vital communities are those which do not fear to encourage their members' individuality. At the same time, we believe that authentic individuality is most likely to arise not in opposition to community, but within the matrix of a supportive and nurturing community. What Joan Chittister has said about the Benedictine monastery applies also to the Quaker meeting. It is not that there is no room for self here. It is just that self grows best when self is not its end. And yeah, the theory of change, that this concept that spirit-centered community is at the core of each of our circles of community and is at the core of QVS. I think that is uniquely Quaker. I think that is uniquely, it's radical, radical, going back to the root of Quakerism, this idea that each one of us is necessary in order to hear God. And we each bring a piece of truth with us, and we have to listen. We have the opportunity to listen to one another in order to hear God most fully. Thanks, John.
Yeah, Kathy.
Hi, everybody. I
I'm wondering if kind of a follow-on question from that, I'm curious, like with the incoming fellows, last year's fellows, the Gen Zers that have applied for the program, what's your sense of how many of them have any like Quaker experience, knowledge, understanding of, or experience with a previous spirit-centered community, and a level of understanding of what's being offered that is the uniquely Quaker piece. I wonder, well, maybe I'll pause for a minute and let you respond to that first.
Haley was just working on the numbers for looking at applicants and percentages of Quaker or not. And earlier today, Haley and I were having our weekly meeting, and most people, when they apply to QVS, there's a question that says, are you a Quaker? Or I forget how it's phrased, but Haley was saying when she was looking through our last couple of years of applications, almost nobody writes yes or no. People write, I attend Dayton Friends meeting. I've gone to BYM camps my whole life. I have been a part of a Lutheran church, but I've tried out Quaker meeting a couple of times. And I think that's important in part because I think friends all over the country are asking, what does it mean to be a Quaker? And so is QVS. What does it mean to be introducing young adults or supporting young adults in their Quaker spiritual lives? So I just, that's a little bit of a tangent. About half of our applicants are folks that we would say are Quaker or Quakerish, maybe 2/3 are Quaker, quote unquote Quakerish. People who wouldn't say I am a Quaker, but who say I have a good deal of experience with Quakers. And I think it really depends on what those people's experiences are. I grew up in New England Yearly Meeting, and I was incredibly blessed to have amazing peer community and amazing mentors. And I attended young adult, retreats when I was elementary, junior high, and high school aged. And those are still some of my closest, like, soulmate friends, I call them. And other Quakers, other people who grew up Quaker didn't have that experience of really being integral in a community, of being seen and loved and supported in their spiritual journeys. So I don't know if we can know exactly how many people have had that experience, and who, people who are trying to get back to it. And I do think that, every year we lose a couple of fellows throughout, they realize this is not for them. And most often it's the intentional community part. It's just not for them. It involves a level of vulnerability that they don't want to say yes to. So we end up kind of weeding out. Some of them leave. Weeding out isn't the right term, but some people we have found think that they want this, and yet they don't quite. So I don't think that answered your question, Kathy, but it's what's on my heart.
Yeah, thank you. I maybe another tangent into that is just wondering, I think the world's in a really different place today than it was when QVS was birthing, and that wasn't very long ago. And I think what I imagine you know, what you'd hear from, you know, a Gen Zer, you know, a decade ago of what they're excited about, what's the life and juice for them, you know, to be potentially connecting with this program. I can imagine that being quite different in having that same question asked today. You know, where's the life and juice for you today? And, you know, where and how might a QVS program really accompany and support you on that growthful journey, you know, and spiritual deepening and community. And I don't know if there's anything else to say in that regard, but I guess I want to affirm that just the sense of we're in a really different place on our planet than we were when QVS was being dreamed up and birthed.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Susan, I see your hand, but I think first let's just, I just want to mention what's in the chat. Someone says, might it be that the target age group isn't 21 anymore, but later? Research suggests early adulthood has stretched on to later years. Could we invite those who try their first job out of college, but find it unrewarding and want more? Then might the QVS experience be shorter, 4 months or for 25-year-olds? And there's some other sentiments of some folks who were older and transitioning out of another job.
Yeah, go look at the chat. So Thomas and I have got something going, right? And it's just a wild idea. And we have to meet Haley, because I'm not just anyone. I know I used to know a lot about this. I don't know if I know anything anymore, but in terms of how you recruit people to lives of commitment. So
well, and Cheryl, the folks that were in the chat chatting, I mean, I think that's part of the reason why we're curious about this, like design your own site placement idea, because I think one of the things that can be difficult for people who are later in life doing QVS is that they perhaps especially might not be able to do an unpaid year, right? There might be family to support. There's all kinds of reasons why, right? So offering that flexibility might be able to allow us to do more of what we're talking about in that chat there. But I see hands, so let me shut up.
Yeah, Susan.
I think for this people in their 20s, there's an intense amount of marketing to buy products and credit cards and like an almost unbelievable amount of advertising directed at kids through social media. And I think there's a lot of that stirs up a lot of anxiety about money, plus there's just a lot of anxiety about money. Things are very expensive. Personal hygiene products are very expensive. And I wonder if you can live in community and explore activism and wonder about yourself and be uniquely Quaker and not be living in a way that's kind of making you really painfully poor for a year. I mean, I was just really glad that you talked about compensation as one of the things that you're thinking about. And I'll stop there. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Susan. Mary Ellen.
Yeah, one of the things that came up as my local support committee was brainstorming was the question about kind of going the other direction than thinking about older folks, but what about folks that are still in college? Some of them in their junior, senior years are going out into the world to do study abroad or service programs that are already structured. And maybe we could collaborate with some of these that have the service component and the immersion component. Certainly, my husband worked with a group at the university here that did a 3-week to month program, that living learning kind of program that they put a tremendous amount of support into, and they had really wonderful experiences. So just exploring whether it could be a bigger spectrum of possibilities. Again, not everybody in the program, but there might be room for some collaboration like that.
Thanks, Mary Ellen.
Keenan.
Thank you. I graduated in, I believe, 14, and I would have done QVS. I graduated from Guilford, but there wasn't anything biology related, which was my major. So the suggestion to allow applicants to, tailor their needs absolutely would have gotten me into QVS, 100%. And I ended up going to Seattle to an AmeriCorps program called Earth Corps, where I worked in community. I didn't live in community, but I worked in a community with 30 other young adults, all being dramatically underpaid. And we were there for 10 months. And there was one house of 7 people who got a house all together. And that was definitely our community center. So as in this, I couldn't help but brainstorm kind of that type of model, which might work better if we are having folks who, can't handle the intentionality of a living community together. It might be possible to find, Quakers of the nearby meeting that have maybe an extra bedroom or, in-law unit that they could house one person in, but not that. And then that would still bolster the QVS community in that city. Just some thoughts. And I also really see a lot of value in our community, the YAFs or the young adult friends, 18 to 35-year-olds who are sticking around are the ones who have, benefited from helping out a meeting and being helped out in turn. People who have served as friends in residence and, gotten to live without paying rent and been able to save up in that way. People who have done landscaping or childcare for the meetings and gotten paid, a little extra money to kind of elevate them to that next, career level through your 20s. So I definitely endorse that, both for staff and for QVS applicants.
Thank you so much for sharing about that. And Keenan, you're on staff in Pacific Yearly Meeting, is that right?
Yes, one of 2.
Thanks for being here.
Kristen.
I'm just gonna throw this out there. I know this isn't part of, the original mission of QVS, but I did a similar program, Mercy Volunteer Corps, about 30 years ago. And I'm sure a lot of you know that a lot of these other programs are not just for young adults, but they're for anyone over aged, whatever. So I feel like while young adults, recent college grads are the kind of like the norm, at least in the other organizations that I know, in my own experience, there was always a handful of like retired folks or people like in their middle adult years who were making a change. And while that brings its own set of challenges in terms of community living, it also brought a lot of richness, I thought. And I spent 2 years with MVC, and my first year we had a community of 4 young adults and an older retired married couple, and the dynamics of our house were really amazing. Not that it wasn't easy, and not that it was easy all the time, but like there definitely was positives to that as well. So I'm just kind of throwing that out there as another model, since we're talking about new ideas. And I'm excited about all the seedling ideas that are being thrown out there, and the idea that this is an experiment and it doesn't always have to look the same. and that there's going to be ebbs and flows, you know, as we move through the years. So anyway, this was great. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you, Kristen. Caitlin, I don't know if you can show the last slide that we have. This has been so great to just hear from everybody about your ideas and perspectives. I want to just introduce myself one more time since I'm brand new to the QVS team. I started in April, but I am an alum of the program from 2016 to 2017. So I'm so happy to be kind of back working for QVS. I absolutely love this organization, and it really supported me as I started my career. So I just want to talk a little bit about different ways that you can support QVS. I know so many people have different skills, capacities, interests, and levels of comfort with different things. So I want to provide a variety of options. One is to subscribe to our newsletter. We send out monthly news, and you can also send the newsletter along to some other friends or your monthly meeting. You can share this recording. It will be posted to the QVS website shortly after. You can follow us on social media. Caitlin does a really amazing job staying engaged on our social media. So you can repost, share with others, connect us with other organizations that you see, and also just talk with friends in your meeting or your larger community about QVS, and also speak with young adults, learn about their life, their challenges, and maybe QVS would be a good opportunity for them. We can also provide you with QVS materials. If that would be helpful, you can leave them at your local meeting. And of course, you can donate, which is really helpful for us as we navigate these challenges and try to explore new ideas. So here are listed a few different ways that you can donate, but you can also reach out to me. My email, I'll put it in the chat. It's Haley@quakervoluntaryservice.org. So I would love to chat with you if you're interested in supporting QVS in any of these ways or other ideas that you have. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, everyone. It was really nice to be with you all. I'm feeling very warm-hearted, getting to hear from you, see you, just feel your energy. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.